Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get restarted with this next topic of identifying cravings, cultivating non-craving, and analysis of the mind. This is where you're going to learn how to go in and almost surgically remove these cravings from the mind. But keep in mind that you're going to need to have the Eightfold Path well underway. If you just got introduced to the Eightfold Path yesterday and that was your first exposure to it, and you need to start practicing that more closely, I suggest you focus on that. And that's what you would like to be doing as you're first getting started on the path to enlightenment and you're looking to develop harmonious relationships, is get your Eightfold Path really well understood and get it well under practice, because that's what's going to help to kind of soften up the mind and start getting rid of some of these cravings, desires, attachments. But then once you've got that well underway and you're looking to really target some of these cravings, desires, attachments, that's where you'll do what I'm describing now. So I'm going to teach you something now that you'll be able to go in and actually surgically remove some of these cravings, desires, attachments from the mind. So just like always, if you guys have questions, feel free to let me know. Okay, so first, just let's revisit what is a craving, desire, attachment, because not everybody who's learning with me right now online and other places was here yesterday to know what these things are. So this will be a refresher for some of you guys. So what craving, desire, attachment is, or wants or expectations or clinging or grasping or holding, this is the longing, the yearning, the mind pulling in the direction of the object of its affection, thinking that something external is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So the mind longs and yearns and chases and chases. It's not the object itself. It's inside the mind. It's the way the mind's longing, yearning for it, with the misunderstanding, thinking that this thing is going to provide lasting satisfaction. So the craving, desire, attachment isn't the money. It's the longing, yearning for it, right? Or it's not the phone. It's the longing, yearning for it. Right? You can learn to have a phone and not be attached to it. Your mind can be trained to do that. But if your mind is longing, yearning, you might be on it all the time. Whenever it dings with a notification, you might look at it right away. Or if it breaks, you might be upset or angry or frustrated. These are the things that are occurring because of the cravings, desires, attachments. So the mind is pulling towards the direction of the objects of its affection. It's like the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide lasting satisfaction. And the mind is a master of craving, desiring, being attached. I gave you guys an example yesterday how an individual could actually be attached to water. Right? It's not that you need water, because you do. You need water in order to survive. But if your mind's longing and yearning for it, that's where your mind's going to experience discontentedness, because craving, desire, attachment is the cause of discontentedness in the unenlightened mind. This is what's causing the discontentedness. With the mind's longing and yearning, if it gets what it wants, it gets happy, excited, elated, thrill, euphoria, those pleasant feelings. But if the mind doesn't get what it wants, it gets the painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, and then there's the neither painful nor pleasant feelings that can be experienced as well. So it's the craving, desire, attachment that is causing the mind to be discontent. So as long as the mind is discontent, if you're angry and you're frustrated and agitated, it's going to be very challenging to have harmonious relationships, because that's going to be coming out in your relationships. So that's why it's so important to go in and remove these cravings, desires, attachments, so that you can experience more and more harmonious relationships. And later in the course, I'm going to teach you specifically how to eliminate attachments to the people who are closest to you. But let me teach you this topic first, because this is going to help you with a lot of other cravings, desires, attachments that are around these kinds of things. So I talked to you yesterday about the three poisons, the three unwholesome roots, or the three fires of craving, anger, and ignorance, or greed, hatred, and delusion, or that unknowing of true reality. The craving, desire, attachment, this is the cause of all discontentedness. And it's the breathing mindfulness meditation and the generosity that is in a generosity is training your mind to let go, let go, let go. Okay? Also, so the Buddha describes craving, desire, attachment not only as the cause of discontent, chapter 105, but it's in volume 11 out of the 13-book series for a reason, because it's not something that you need to really tackle right away up front in your journey with the path to enlightenment. So if you're making your way through all the teachings and the books and all the courses and retreats that I share, eventually you're going to be able to get to that. But just understand that craving, desire, attachment is the cause of rebirth. So that's one of the reasons why it's so important to eliminate it, is not only is it causing discontentedness, but it's causing rebirth as well. And this is why that by the time you're eliminating more and more of your cravings, desires, attachments, and you see your discontentedness is gradually diminishing, when you get to a point that it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you don't have any discontentedness in your mind, not only will you know that your mind is enlightened, but you'll also know that you're not going to be experiencing rebirth. You're not going to be coming back into the world over and over and over again. So you're going to see over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years that your mind's peaceful and joyful because your mind has eliminated all of its cravings. And you'll also have that reassurance that you'll know, gosh, I don't have to come back here and do this all over again. Wow, that was really challenging. No need to come back and do it all over again. So this is something that you can understand about craving, desire, attachment as well. Okay. All right. So now let's go in to talk more about craving, desire, attachment. This is the number one goal on the path to enlightenment. Of course, you're cultivating wisdom. That's what you're really working towards. But then that wisdom is helping you to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments, because the ultimate goal in the path to enlightenment is to eliminate your discontentedness and actually get to enlightenment. So the underlying thing that you're doing is working to eliminate your cravings, desires, attachments, learning how to restrain your mind and not allowing the mind to just chase and chase and chase and chase. But how could you ever eliminate these cravings, desires, attachments if you didn't understand how to identify them? So I'm going to teach you how to identify specific cravings, desires, attachments in your mind. Identifying your cravings, desires, attachments is probably the second most important skill that you could develop on the path to enlightenment, with meditation being the first important skill that you need to develop. Identifying your cravings, desires, attachments is the very next one. So just like I taught you how to do meditation, and you're learning that more and more all the time, this is a skill that you need to learn too, is how to identify your individual cravings so you can look inward instead of looking outward for what's causing these discontent feelings. So the breathing mindfulness meditation is training your mind to let go and eliminate craving, desire, attachment. It's also helping you to develop right mindfulness so that in the moment, whenever your mind is discontent, you will notice it with your mindfulness. If you're not doing breathing mindfulness meditation, the things that I'm going to teach you here aren't going to be very effective. So you need to be able to build up your breathing mindfulness meditation practice first. So that's why I mentioned to you that if yesterday was your first time getting exposed to the Eightfold Path, I suggest you hang out with that for a while and be practicing that and really get that under your belt really well before you move into something like this. But as you're developing your breathing mindfulness meditation practice and your mindfulness is becoming more and more refined, and you're starting to be able to notice the anger as it's starting to arise, and you're cutting off and cutting off and cutting off, what I'm going to be teaching you here is going to really help you. And then this mental discipline section of right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, this is all going to culminate into the elimination of craving, desire, attachment to get to the point where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. And you also need those other sections of the Eightfold Path as well. But when you're experiencing those discontent feelings, you need to be looking at them like a red light on the dashboard of your car. Right? When you experience anger and frustration and agitation and annoyance, this is like a red light flashing for you and saying, hey, something's wrong here. You've got a problem. Well, if you're driving a car and the red light, the check engine soon light comes on, what are you going to do? You're probably going to pull over, right? And if you've got some skills, you'll probably pop open the hood and you'll probably start looking under the hood and trying to investigate what's going on here and what's the problem. And if you don't have the skills, you might take your car into the mechanic and ask the mechanic to take a look at this and see if they can figure out what's wrong with it, right? So what I'm going to help you do is I'm going to help you develop these skills so that you can pop the hood and you can start looking under the hood and kind of figuring out what are the cravings, desires, attachments. But in some situations, you're not going to be able to identify your cravings, desires, attachments, and you're going to need to bring your mind to the mechanic. The mechanic in this scenario is your teacher, right? Your teacher is going to be able to talk with you ask you some targeted questions and start to uncover what are the actual cravings in your mind. So one by one, you'll start to develop this skill. So you might have to come to me 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times until you develop this skill, but eventually you'll be able to do this on your own. You'll be able to figure out what your cravings, desires, attachments are. So there's this teaching that I'm going to share with you how to do this, but then there's the practice of it. You're going to need to practice it. And in some situations, you'll be able to identify your cravings, but in other situations, you're not going to be able to. And that's where you need to take your mind to the mechanic, to your teacher. And you can come talk with me privately, either here in Chiang Mai or online, or send me a message, and I'll be able to help you to uncover what are your cravings, desires, attachments. And then more and more, you'll build the skill, and you'll be able to do this. While we talk about cravings, desires, attachments, and we talk about these emotions and feelings like anger and sadness and others, and guilt and shame and fear, there's really this spectrum. There's a spectrum of cravings. There's these really strong, deeply held cravings that are in the mind that produce really extreme feelings, really strong feelings. But then there's kind of lighter cravings and clinging in the mind that you just kind of get annoyed about, right? Like if somebody called you and told you that your mom died, or that your mom's been in a terrible car accident, she's being rushed to the hospital, you might have really strong emotions because of that due to your deep attachment to your mom. But if you just kind of wanted a chocolate bar, and you went into the store and they didn't have your chocolate bar, you might just be kind of annoyed or a little bit frustrated. So even though we talk about it as craving, desire, attachment, there's this real spectrum from very light ones that are kind of almost insignificant, that just produce a little bit of annoyment that maybe you're done and over with in 30 seconds. But then there's stronger, more deeply held cravings that produce much stronger and intense discontentedness. So you're going to need to pay attention to this whole spectrum. Also, whenever you're experiencing any bout of discontentedness, there's typically more than one craving, desire, attachment involved, especially early in practice. You can have 2, 3, 4, 5, even 6 different cravings that are all producing one particular round of discontentedness. So the more intense your feelings, usually the deeper held the cravings are, or the more of them that are in the mind that are being triggered that are producing that particular bout of discontentedness. But if you use the discontentedness like a red light on the dashboard of your car, you can know like, there's something going on here. Let me investigate this. Let me look at it more closely. Where what we used to do in the past is we used to just blame other people. We thought that everybody else was the problem, and we just kept going on in our day. Where now what you've got to do is you got to pull your car over and you got to look inward. Okay, so this is the process that you would like to go through whenever there's any discontentedness arising in the mind. So when discontentedness occurs, cut it off and let it go. We're not doing any kind of analysis of the mind yet. As soon as you see discontentedness, and if you see it as a bodily sensation, cut it off and let it go. Whether it's a conditioned pleasant feeling, a painful feeling, or feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. Try to catch it sooner and sooner as a bodily sensation, realizing that you're not going to always be able to do that, particularly early in practice. Sometimes it is going to become a feeling in the mind, but the more and more you can catch it as a bodily sensation, the better. Okay, so this first step is whenever you see the discontentedness, if you see it as a bodily sensation, cut it off and let it go. You might need to redirect the mind. If you see it as a feeling and that's when you actually notice it, cut it off there. If you notice it as a condition of the mind, or maybe for a few hours you've been agitated and annoyed and frustrated, and you're like, whoa, what am I doing here? Cut that off and let it go. Redirect the mind, right? So you would like to be able to catch it sooner and sooner as a bodily sensation. You like to get to the point where you don't even have to think about it. The mind just automatically, boom, it responds and cuts this off and let it go. Okay, that's the first thing. Then, once the discontentedness is gone out of the mind, whether it's a few minutes or a few hours or a few days, then you would like to move to step 2, which is reflect on what are the cravings, desires, attachments that led to any particular discontentedness that you're experiencing. You got to look inward and you got to try to figure out what are the cravings? What is the mind holding on to? What is it wanting to be permanent? There's something that the mind is longing, yearning for. There's something that it's craving in this situation. Otherwise, it wouldn't be experiencing this discontentedness. So you've got to look inward and figure that out. Then once you figure it out, then you move to step number 3, which is you need to develop a plan to eliminate the specific cravings, desires, attachments that cause the discontentedness to arise, while maintaining a consistent practice of breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity. So you're always going to be practicing this breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity frequently each day. But in situations where you see this discontentedness arise, you cut it off, let it go, you look inward, you figure out what it is, and then there's a certain plan that I'm going to teach you how to put together a plan so that you can actually surgically remove this craving, desire, attachment from the mind. Then you're going to repeat this over and over and over again. Okay, so let me give you an example of how this works. So one day I was in the car, I was driving down the road, my wife's truck, because I don't have a car. I was driving down the road and I reached for my mobile phone and it wasn't there. And I noticed this fear came up in my mind. And I happened to be at a red light when this happened. I realized this fear came up in the mind. I was like, oh my goodness, my phone, I've left the house without the phone. And this fear came up in my mind. And right away I started thinking, what if there's a problem? What if I get a flat tire? What if I get in an accident? You know, my mind started going through all those things. So I cut that off and cut that off and cut that off and let it go. And then right away, what the mind wanted to do is it wanted to turn around and go back to the house and get the phone. Because I was only 5 minutes from my house. I could have very easily went and got the phone. But I realized in that moment, by reflecting and looking inward, I realized my mind is attached to the phone. I'm craving for this phone to be permanent. And that's why the fear came up in the mind. And the phone isn't permanent, but the mind wanted it to be permanent. So turning around and getting the phone doesn't actually solve the problem, because I needed to eliminate my craving. I needed to eliminate that craving for the phone to be permanent. So going around to the house and picking up the phone and now having it with me, that just allows the craving to continue to exist. But that's the first inclination that I had with the lack of wisdom, was to go get the phone. But instead, what I chose to do is I chose to not go back to the house. I chose to go continue in my day. I was supposed to only be out for about an hour and a half. I was just doing a couple things outside. But instead, I went and developed this plan where I'm now going to stay outside for longer and longer periods of time. Not only did I do my hour and a half things, I went to go get something to eat. I went to the movies. I just walked around the mall a little bit. I got used to being outside without the phone, right? Because I realized when I was a child and I was growing up, I didn't have a mobile phone with me. You know, now the mind was attached to it. But earlier in life, I didn't go outside with a phone, so why do I need one now? But my mind had gotten attached to it. So by extending the amount of time that I was out, it was training the mind, this phone is not permanent. You need to get used to going outside without the phone. So now when I came home, I didn't just rush to the phone and figure out who called me and what happened while I was gone and check all my messages and stuff like that. I just came back home, started spending time with my son, doing some different things around the house and just hanging out in the house. And then after 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, I went and got the phone. But now, knowing that the mind had this, I waited about 2 or 3 days and I did it again. I intentionally left the phone at home this time. And now I went outside without it, putting the mind in the situation that it didn't want to be in, which was without this phone. The mind was holding on to this phone. So when I went out the second time, I wasn't fearful, but there was some underlying agitation. I didn't feel quite good going outside without the phone, but I did it. And I went outside and I did the same thing. I hung out, did different things outside. When I came home, I didn't rush to the phone and check it. I just left it where it was, did my stuff. And then after half hour, 2 hours, I went and checked the phone. Then I waited another maybe 5 days or so. And then I did it again. And I noticed that the mind was quite peaceful without the phone when I went outside. So I had pretty good confidence that I'd let go of this phone. But then about 2 months later, I accidentally left the phone at home again. I was driving down the road. I reached for the phone and it wasn't there. And there was no fear. There was no uncomfortableness. There was no nothing. I was like, oh, I left my phone. Okay, no worries. I just kept on driving. I just kept on going throughout my day. No big deal. There was no discontentedness whatsoever. So I was pretty convinced that I had eliminated this craving, desire, attachment. But then a year later, I had this phone, this iPhone 6, and I accidentally dropped it on the floor and the screen shattered and it completely broke. And I looked at it and I started laughing. I was like, there's that impermanence again. Well, Luckily, I had another phone. There was a phone that my wife had, another iPhone 6 that she wasn't using, and I was able to get that from her, and I was able to use that instead, right? So I just switched over and transferred my phone, no discontentedness whatsoever. So I knew I had let go of the craving, desire, attachment of this phone, right? Where initially there was discontentedness, where now all this impermanence that was happening with the phone, there was no discontentedness whatsoever. But it came from going to step one, where when I noticed the initial discontentedness, I cut it off and let it go. Then right there at the traffic light, I started reflecting. What is the mind craving? It's craving the phone. It's craving to be able to talk to people if I have a problem. It's craving to not have a problem when I'm outside, right? There was all these cravings. And initially my mind wanted to go get the phone. And I was like, no. I have to restrain the mind, have to pull the mind back. Let me keep on going through my day. So I put this plan together where I started putting the mind in the situation that it didn't want to be in, which is outside without the phone. Right? So I kept putting the mind in this situation over and over and over and over again until I was convinced that this craving didn't exist anymore, because the mind needed to be just as comfortable going outside with the phone as without the phone. And now when the mind had gotten to that point, I knew that I had eliminated this craving. Okay, so this is one example from my life. I can give you other examples too if you like. But what I plan to do in the rest of our time together is a group activity where, if you guys would like, you can start developing this skill. Whereas if you guys would like to share what it is that you have noticed discontentedness about in your mind, you can share the situation, you can share the discontentedness that you're experiencing. If you can identify the cravings, you can talk about those. And then if you'd like to talk about a potential plan, you could do that. And I'll share with you and kind of give you advice and feedback to be able to help you with that. So if you've got all of those pieces, you could actually share all of those pieces. But maybe you don't have all of those pieces. Maybe all you have is, I get discontent in this situation and I have no idea why. You can share that too. And I will start asking you questions and kind of walk you through and help you to identify your cravings. And then once we identify your cravings, I will help you to see a certain plan that you can put together in order to eliminate it. Because in about 80%, 90% of the time, you can do what I'm sharing with you here. You can actually put together this plan like I'm talking about. But there's some situations where this doesn't work, right? Because it's not a end all be all. This isn't a universal truth or anything. This is a general strategy and approach that'll work in about 80 or 90% of the situations. In those other situations where you can't use this, there's other things that you can do. Okay? So if you guys would like to share, you can explain your situation and the discontentedness that you experienced. You can just stop there if you like, and that's all you know, right? You can go on if you like and share, what do you think caused the discontentedness? What are the cravings, desires, attachments? You could stop there if you like, or you can continue on. What was the craving, desires, attachments that caused this discontentedness? You can then go on if you like. What is the potential plan that you can implement to eliminate the cravings, desires, attachments? And these are the discontent feelings that we're talking about here. So this is going to help you to develop this skill to go in and identify your cravings. So if you guys would like to share here at the temple, you could use a microphone. If there's people online, if you guys would like to participate here, you surely can by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raising your hand in Zoom. So is anybody who would like to do this? I see Claire smiling. Yeah, yes, sir. Go ahead. This is great. Sometimes the mind is shy because of that personal existence view, right? It doesn't want to get out there because it wants to be perceived in a certain way. The mind is kind of like that. So this is actually a way for you to practice. If you feel shy that you don't want to share, putting your mind in this situation will actually help it.
Thanks. I am very shy.
What's that? You said you're not shy?
I am shy.
Oh, you are shy.
Yeah.
This is great. This is practice right here. You are actually implementing the strategy right now.
Exactly. So I had an experience this morning where I identify and take a lot of pride in being someone who's always on time. So for many years in business, I went for many years without being late for an appointment and took that as a source of pride. And this morning, I realised that I was hungry. The body needed food. Mm-hmm. But if I ate breakfast, I would arrive here late. Yesterday was the same. I very easily decided yesterday I won't have breakfast. I'll be hungry through the day, but I won't be late. That's fine. So yesterday I arrived late. This morning I thought, what would happen if I was purposefully late and had breakfast? And I realised that would be a very difficult thing for me to do because of the craving, desire, attachment I have to my self-image as someone who is never, ever late. Mm-hmm. So I sat down and had breakfast and practiced letting go of those fears and cravings I had about my self-identity. So I just wanted to raise this because I don't completely understand it all, but I realised this morning I was pushing myself purposefully to try and eliminate that as an exercise. And I'm interested in your thoughts on, you said several times letting it go, how you actually let that go. So I sat there saying to myself, David won't be angry if I arrive late. No one will care if I arrive late. Mm-hmm. The body needs food. But is there anything else you'd suggest as far as letting it go?
Yeah, what you just described is perfect. That's exactly what you would like to do, because what you've got here is you've got this craving to be on time. That's the first thing, right? And then that's also embedded in your personal existence view, which is what we talked about a little bit yesterday. And then there's also some conceit there, which is one of the fetters as well, that boastfulness, that arrogance, that pride, that kind of thing. So you're actually hitting three different things by addressing this particular issue. So the symptom is that you feel uncomfortable when you show up late, right? So showing up late like you are doing now is wonderful, because you're right. I'm not going to be angry if you show up late. You can show up any time that you like. If you're showing up somewhere and someone's angry, you know that their mind is causing it themselves. But one thing I would add to it, so you doing what you're doing is exactly the way you would like to do this. If there's any, let me go back to this here. If there's any discontentedness that's starting to arise, either in the morning when you wake up, knowing that you're intentionally going to be late, while you're eating breakfast, or while you're walking here, or while you're coming in, if you're noticing anything, cut it off and let it go. Cut it off and let it go. Then you've already done the reflection. You already see, and I just helped you a little bit to see a little bit more of what are the cravings, desires, attachments. And now keep putting your mind, number 3, keep putting your mind in the situation where you're showing up late intentionally, until you get to a point where you notice that the mind is comfortable doing that, not just in this situation, but in other situations too, right? So that's perfect. The one thing that I'll add to what you're describing is that by you choosing to get breakfast, this is loving kindness for this being who you are, right? To come here, not having breakfast, sit here all morning, feeling hunger, pain, and these kinds of things. This would not be loving kindness to this being, right? So that is another part that can make you feel comfortable, like, yeah, what I'm doing here is a wise choice. I'm showing loving kindness for this being. Now, of course, if you were like doing this for a work thing, that's probably where you've done it, right? In like a work environment. In those situations, there can be pretty big consequences for not showing up on time. So if you were talking about this in relationship to that, of course, the suggestion would be to wake up a little bit earlier, get out the door a little bit earlier, still get your breakfast and show up on time. But at the same time, you need to also know that even going to work, you're going to be late sometimes because of impermanence. The traffic is going to be blocked, or there's going to be some problem where you can't get to work on time. So if you do this work in a situation like this, where there are no consequences, the only consequence is you're not going to learn what it is that we're doing in the morning. But today is the only morning that I'm teaching first. Other than that, it's going to be meditation first. So you'll be able to show up 10, 15 minutes late, or whatever you decide, 5 minutes late, whatever your threshold is that you'd like to do. Get comfortable with that in this kind of environment where there aren't any significant consequences. And then you'll feel more comfortable when it comes to a work situation too. So that's exactly what you would like to do. And just remind yourself that this is loving kindness to this being, to make sure it has food before you go into a situation like this where you're learning, because there's a lot of calories that you burn through learning. I think people teach that you burn more calories through thinking than you do through physical activity, actually. So if you were here to learning all this stuff, digesting all this content, burning all these calories, and you just be getting hungrier and hungrier. So what you're describing is ideal. That's what you'd like to do. Yep. Okay, I saw a bunch of others have mics, so whoever like to go first, up to you guys. Mm-hmm.
So this is actually a very recent example that happened this morning. Mm-hmm. So I just got this new job offer actually throughout the past week during interviews and stuff. And everything was working out really great. I love the team. I love kind of the job role, the responsibilities and stuff. But this morning, actually, the HR called me and be like, I know we talked about this previous compensation, but we're not able to give you that same amount as we discussed internally. There's just some budget change. And so we'll have to cut probably 20% from the original comp package that we talked about. We still really much value, we want to work with you, but this is the most I can offer. So I was immediately feeling kind of sad, resentful, unrespected, because we've been through so many interviews, like 7 rounds before, and now we're kind of almost set on this offer, but now there's this sudden change. Mm-hmm. So that's the first part of the discontentedness list. And the second part, which makes this even worse, is I got off the phone with one of my friends. And when she heard about the whole thing, she was immediately like, I think that's not a great opportunity anymore. Like, you're missing out on so much other good opportunities. You should be looking out there. There's so many other great startups or companies you can go for. Mm-hmm. So immediately, there's not just that my own resentment or discontentedness, there's also the fear of missing out. I'm feeling shame that I probably did not try as hard as I could, like go 120% on job searching. So I guess the two conversations I had just kind of intertwined with each other and made things even worse. Mm-hmm. So I guess my question more is like, I'm not sure I identify all the cravings, and also I feel like it's a bigger problem than like, should I have a chocolate bar or like a daily craving. So I'm wondering.
So let me ask you some questions. Out of this compensation package, if the salary was what you expected, but maybe there was just a little bit less vacation time, would you feel the same way?
I think so, but to a lesser degree.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a craving for money, which is common.
Or I think it's a recognition of that acknowledgement of my value, because I think that's more reflected in the like financial rewards. Mm-hmm.
So you're putting a price tag on yourself, right? There's a feeling of, I am worth this much money, right? So this is what the mind tends to do, right? But you also need to look at it from the side of the employer as well, right? That they have a certain budget, they have certain financial constraints and stuff like this. So somebody saying that this is what we can offer you doesn't mean that they don't value you. This is aside from the craving, desire, attachment, because you need to look at and maybe change your perspective on things. And I'm not saying whether this job is right for you or wrong for you, because I don't know. But it's unwise to look at it as whatever financial compensation they're giving you, that's how they value you. Because, companies, having been a business owner before, we only have a certain amount of budget, and this is what we can afford, or else it throws off all these other things. So you would be unwise to think that this company is only valuing you to a certain degree and then put your feelings attached to that. So you can't look at the salary as this is what they value me at. This would be unwise, because they just might not have the budget. That might be even higher than what they initially thought. I don't know. It doesn't sound like that's the case, but let's just say a company was planning to pay you $100,000 a year. Maybe what they pay most people is maybe $80,000 a year. And now they've actually bumped it up and you don't even know that. But maybe if your mind was expecting 120, you might feel like, whoa, they don't value me. They don't respect me. Well, in reality, they've actually increased it more than they normally pay, but the mind is perceiving it through your perception as they don't value me because it's not meeting my expectations of 120,000. When in reality, they've actually given you more than they do typical people with your same skills or your same ability to offer things. So you need to be able to change your perspective and don't look at it as whatever someone's offering you, that's how they value you. So I would get rid of that from your mind to start with. Is just look at it from just what you can see, which is this is their budget, this is what they offered, and I can either accept that or decline it. And that's my choice here. But putting your feelings into it and putting all these perceptions, the Buddha calls these perceptions, that if you cling to your perception that this salary means they don't respect me, and this salary means they respect me, that's just a perception. A perception is your views and opinions about the world, and they may or may not be true. And what the Buddha teaches you is don't add that into it. Sometimes what you hear in modern day is they say, don't add to the story, right? Like don't put your own story into the scenario. So you're assuming things and you have these perceptions that you're clinging to, and it's clouding your ability to just be able to see true reality, which is they've offered you a job, they've offered you a salary, they've offered you a compensation package, and it is what it is. Whatever they offer you, you can either just accept it or decline it. It's up to you. And it's wonderful to have that option, that you have certain skills, that you even have a job offer. There's plenty of people out there that don't have the skills, they don't have the education, they don't have the ability to even get a job. So just consider yourself fortunate that you even have the opportunity to either accept or decline an offer at all, right? So just think about those kinds of things. So those are the kind of things that will help you with your perception of the whole thing. But in terms of actually eliminating this, there isn't any way to put your mind in these situations because this involves other people doing things. So this is one of those 10 or 20% of the situations where you can't put together a plan. It's just a matter of through your career, you're going to be experiencing various job interviews and offers, and you're going to be able to be in that situation through these kinds of situations. But you're going to need to change your perspective and not consider that what somebody's offering you is how much they value you. I'll give you an example. One time I was working in a consulting company and I was making $150,000 a year, and they were giving me that much money because I was going to bring in this one particular project, and they had expected that I was going to bring it in. Well, then when that project didn't come through, they said, hey, we need to adjust your salary. And I was like, all right, what do you need to adjust it to? They said $125,000. I said, all right, no problem. Because before that, I was actually making like $95,000. So it was already like a $30,000 increase going into that company anyway. So I was like, yeah, no problem, 125 deal. So then I was getting paid that. And then I was on the road a lot. Monday through Thursday, I was on the road, and I wasn't interested in traveling anymore, and I was interested in being home more. So I started looking for other jobs, and there was these different companies that I was applying to, and I found that perfect job, the perfect title, the perfect responsibilities, the perfect company, all this other stuff. And I was thinking that I was going to have to probably take a pay cut because I knew I was with this consulting company that pays a lot of money, but I didn't know how much. And this company offered me $90,000, and I was surprised. And it took me a few weeks and a lot of talking with HR before I finally realized, like, you know what, even though I'm taking this pay cut, it's actually best for me because I can come off the road. I can create a real life for myself. I can be at home. I can have friends and stuff like this, because before I didn't really have any kind of real life because I was just always on the road. So I ended up taking that job, and the people at that job really valued what I was doing. My direct, I was coming in as a manager. So my director, she was very inspiring. She was very helpful. She improved my ability to have certain professional skills and all these other things. So when you look at compensation, what we do as employees is we tend to look at the money in the vacation time and stuff like this. But here's how you should look at it from a professional standpoint. You should look at it like a triangle, and there's three aspects of compensation. There's the money, which is the one that a lot of people look at. There's also quality of work, and then there's training. These are the three things that you're actually getting, right? And as an employer, the best thing would be to be right in the middle. But some employers, they try to drive it down towards the bottom of the triangle where there's quality work and training. And they kind of talk about those things a lot, where the employee is going to try to drive it towards compensation. That's what we tend to look at. But the places that pay you more are usually the places that don't have very good quality work, and they're not training you very well. So you might be actually getting more money, but you're not getting quality work and you're not getting training. And that's why they have to pay you more money, because they're not really helping your career. So early in your career, you would like to focus on quality work and training, because that's what's going to build your skills. And then when you get to your prime of your career, like in your 40s, that's where you'll be able to really make lots of money, because now you have lots of quality work and lots of training under your belt, and people will pay you that high dollar. But early in your career, oftentimes we look for money. So I would encourage you to try to get something that's balanced, where you're getting a certain amount of quality work and training, but then also a fair compensation as well. And then the more that you are working with quality work and training, over time, you will get more and more compensation. But if you drive towards compensation, you'll actually outpace yourself, and you'll get to the point where you won't have very many skills, and you'll kind of like not be able to continue in your career. And this is what I was actually doing when I was on the road. I was actually making lots and lots and lots of money, but I wasn't getting new skills. And I actually got to a point where if I hadn't switched to my own company and made my own company, I probably would have been capped out, because I wasn't able to continue to grow, because I just kept going for more and more and more and more money instead of building the quality work and the training. So you'd like to look at it as a triangle. But in terms of eliminating your craving, desire, attachment, and doing this, that's going to happen naturally by you moving to different companies and stuff like that. There isn't a plan that you can create. But the craving that you need to get rid of is that personal existence view, where you're identifying with wanting a certain amount of money, and this is a measure of my worth and my value based on the money, where it's really not, because a company can value you highly, but their budget is just lower. So the company that I moved to, they had a very low budget for their employees, but they really valued their employees a lot. They treated us really well, and it was a great company to work for. Mm-hmm.
Can I actually ask also about the second part of the story, which is like the shameness or the fear of missing out? Because I think that actually hit me as hard as the first part when I just had that conversation.
Sure. By the way, what's your age?
26.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We're usually looking for money because we spend so much time in college, and we get out, we don't want the big paycheck
I think away. It's about the money, but I'm already taking a pay cut actually for this job, but it's fine. I think it's more of like breaking the promise, and it was not aligned with like the comp I was expecting.
I see.
I think that's...
Did they share with you that they were planning to pay you at this higher amount, and then after all the interviews, they dropped it down? Okay.
Bit intentional. That's why I feel especially disrespected.
Yeah. So in those kinds of situations, you'll have to evaluate it, right? Because if they had already promised you this, and that's kind of what they were setting out, and they come in with a lesser offer, and you take that, they're going to get into the habit of realizing that, hey, we can promise her this and she'll take it if it's here. And it's kind of unwise to kind of go in those kinds of situations. So that's something that you need to look at. So that's why like our conversation isn't whether you should accept this job or not. It's more about not valuing your worth based on the compensation that's being offered. But in that situation, you may decide to decline the offer just because they kind of set it up here, and now they're coming in here, and that's going to be a trend that you're going to see in the company, because if they tend to do that on the front side like this, once you get into the company, you're going to see more and more of those kinds of things happening. Do you have another craving, desire, attachment that you'd like to talk about that maybe we can come up with this for? Another type of discontentedness that's occurring?
Someone else.
Oh, okay. Up to you. Yeah, maybe we can circle back if we have more time.
Yes, and maybe I'll get some personal time if needed.
That's very thoughtful of you. Claire?
I would say my greatest discontentedness in life kind of starts with my relationship with my mother, who just somehow never really saw me as who I see myself as. Mm-hmm. And I've managed to recreate that kind of dynamic in my intimate relationships ever since. So I guess the craving, desire, attachment is, I don't know. I'm struggling with this, so I'm not sure I know what the different parts of it are. Mm-hmm. That's why I haven't been as clever about working on it.
It sounds like you're attached to your mom, right? Would you say? Is your mom still alive, by the way?
No.
No, okay.
No, I'm attached to being seen.
Okay.
I feel like that's the attachment. I'm extremely easygoing. Mm-hmm. Probably in response to being around her. And it drives me crazy that, that people don't value that, mm-hmm. Or that they don't extend the same kindness in response.
Okay.
On that, on a rare occasion when I actually do have something that's important to me that I'm asking of people, mm-hmm. that I would like to then receive the same kind of kindness, respect, space, recognition that I offer to them 97% of the time.
Okay, so that I don't assume anything, what do you mean when you say that I want to be seen?
Yeah, I want to be seen. Well, I'll use my mother as an example since she's not alive. I think she didn't think I was a very nice person. Somehow, she was always in competition with me, and it like, she would kind of make fun of me if I didn't do as well as her at something, and she would just be completely irked if I was better than her at something. So, like, I respect all of her skills, and I learned a tremendous amount from her, but she could never be content with her being her and me being me. Mm-hmm. So being seen, I would like to be seen as, good at what I'm good at, bad at what I'm bad at. It's me.
Does that mean you would like people to know who you are and what you're doing?
Yeah.
And your skills and your abilities?
Yes. My skills and abilities and my easygoingness.
Okay.
That seems like a value to me.
Okay. So this is all personal existence view.
Right.
The mind's wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And this, again, doesn't fit into this in terms of a plan, coming up with a plan, because you're going to be around people who don't understand you and don't understand your background and what you can offer and those kinds of things. It's just going to happen by a natural course of life that it's going to happen. There's nothing you can do to induce this because it involves somebody else. Like with me, with the cell phone, I could do something in order to create this plan, but this involves other people. So you're not going to be able to tell other people like, oh, pretend like you don't understand who I am. But it's going to happen because you're going to meet new people, and different people are going to just not care about what you're doing or not think about what you're doing or anything like this. So it's going to happen as part of your life, and you're going to need to train your mind to let go. So getting rid of personal existence view is what's going to solve this. And that's part of Volume 1, Chapter 16. It'll teach you how to do that. Is there another example that you might have besides this one?
I'm consumed by this one.
Yeah. So, okay, if you would like to work on this one, Volume 1, Chapter 16.
Okay.
Work on that, read that, and then let me know what questions you have, because this is a challenging one for a lot of people, is getting rid of personal existence view. And that one causes a lot of problems for people, but it's one of the hardest fetters to understand. But there's specific teachings in there where I explain what it is and I explain how to proactively eliminate it, but it just doesn't fit to this scenario here that I'm describing.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Chris, do you have something?
So an example from this morning was I made a stop at 7-Eleven to grab a little bit of food, and it was quite crowded with people. And I noticed myself getting agitated when people weren't lining up, or they're skipping the line, or someone who was paying, they were very slow and kind of focused on themselves and their own concerns without being very aware of the crowdedness around them and so on. And then when I was also paying, there was someone who was standing very close to me. Like they themselves were waiting to pay and so on. So I think for me, it highlights a broader attachment around an expectation of consideration of others.
Mm-hmm.
And when people are being inconsiderate, I respond to that with a lot of agitation.
Okay, so there's a few things going on here. So first, when that is arising, like you're waiting in line and you're noticing you're becoming agitated, you would like to be cutting that off and cutting it off and cutting it off. Then, based on what you just shared, and when we reflect on this, I can see what's happening is, of course, you're wanting this person in the front of the line to do things in a certain way. There's a certain way that you think in your mind is considerate. You think that once you pay, maybe they should move to the side, or maybe they should put their money away and leave in a relatively quick period of time to allow the next person to come in. And your mind's judging that through your conceit, that fetter of conceit, the arrogance, the pride, the ego. It's judging that as being considerate or respectful. But you got to be able to understand that what your mind is judging others to do isn't necessarily accurate, right? By you saying like, okay, if this person leaves within, I don't know, just make up a time, 2 seconds, that's considerate. But if they stay there for longer than 3 or 4 or 5 seconds, that's inconsiderate. That's the mind being judgmental and looking at this is wholesome and this is unwholesome, and they're doing something that I disagree with, so therefore I'm going to consider that to be inconsiderate. So you've got to get rid of that judgment and just realize that people do things in a different way. I had the same thing in the past. I used to experience this because I remember, I think you grew up in Canada, is it? Yeah, I grew up in the USA, which Canada and USA has a lot of similar culture. I remember that's kind of the way we did things in the USA, is that we would go up to the line, we would pay, and then we would move to the side, or we would take our stuff right away to let the next person come. And I remember when I came to Thailand and I saw people didn't do it that way, I felt the same way as you. At one time, I felt that, wow, this is so inconsiderate. Like, how could they just do this? But if you understand how people function here, is like they're not in a hurry. They're not rushing somewhere. They're just taking their time and they're enjoying the journey rather than rushing and hurrying. So the way that you're going to do this is with number 1, cut this off and let it go. Reflect inward and look at your mind is longing and yearning for someone to function in this line in a certain way. And now what you do with number 3 is you're going to need to go into these situations multiple times. And 7-Eleven's an easy one because you probably visit that one somewhat frequently. So go in those places. Sometimes maybe even if you're not interested in buying anything, you just go into those places, especially the smaller ones, the real big ones now that they have a lot more space, but some of the smaller ones, like maybe the one down here at the end of the street, it's a little bit smaller. Is that the one you went to? Down at the end of the street here?
A little bit that way and then over. So
Okay.
I'm not sure if it's the same one.
The smaller the ones, those are really good for you because it's going to be really cramped in there and you're going to get a chance to be in really tight spaces with people. And this, you're going to need to train your mind. It's okay. It's impermanence. It's impermanence. It's impermanence. So you're going to need to put the mind in that situation where as often as you can, at least once or twice a day. If you're able to do this is going to be really helpful for you to train your mind to let go. And when you see people taking their time and they're paying, just understand that they're not being inconsiderate. They're just doing things differently than you. It's just impermanence. That's all it is. Your way isn't the right way, and other people aren't doing it the wrong way. But that's what the conceit, that's what the ego will do. The ego will think the way that you're doing it is the right way, and the way other people are doing it is the wrong way. So when people are doing it differently than you, just understand that this is impermanence. That's all it is. It's not the wrong way. It's just a different way than what you choose to do it. So you function based on the way that you would like to do things, but then understand that other people are going to do things differently. And that's okay, that the people do things differently. That's what makes our world a fun and interesting place. Okay, so going into these environments regularly is going to really help you.
Yeah. And a quick follow-up. If I also have a reaction to observing someone perform harm, an instance of harm, what would you recommend for those kinds of situations?
Can you give me an example?
Not off the top of my head, but let's say someone who is expressing ill will through anger, let's say.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that person who's being angry and having ill will and talking harshly, you're not the cause of that. So there's nothing you can do to stop it, right? Your goal in this life isn't to go out into the world and stop other people from doing harmful things. They have to learn the wisdom and they have to learn how to restrain their mind. You stepping in when someone's being angry and bitter and harsh and hostile, it isn't helping, because that person has to gain the wisdom to understand that that's unwise. So if that kind of situation's going on, there's nothing that you're going to do to solve the problem. That person has to eliminate their craving, because that's what's causing their anger. It's not you that's causing it. It's their own craving. So they have to learn to eliminate their craving. So there's nothing that you need to do to step in when somebody's having ill will and anger, because you're not going to be able to solve it. They're just going to turn and be angry at you. That's it. Right? So all you need to do is maintain your calmness and composure and just keep on going throughout your day. If this person is being angry and bitter and harsh and hostile, they're going to experience the consequences of that, not you. But if you insert yourself into the situation, now it's going to affect you. Anything else? No? Okay. So I think I don't know your name. What's your name? John, that's right.
I wanted to bring up an example that's a little bit similar to Chris, so we can skip that part because it sort of has two ends in it. Up to you. So I've noticed that when I get a 2-hour massage, as I was lucky enough to get yesterday, I often get irritated afterwards. I think the depth of the massage goes to points in my body that store tension and trauma. Science seems to show is stored in the body too. So this is a pattern, and I definitely noticed it yesterday. As I left the massage shop, someone had parked their bikes in ways so I couldn't get mine out. They were sort of heavy, could barely move them. That was fine, but I was well aware of my irritation. I was driving, first red light, couple, woman crosses while it's red for us. She's smart. the husband is stuck on his phone. He decides to pause exactly when it becomes green for us. I mutter, I don't know if you heard me, idiot, and drive close to him, well aware that it's just an idiotic action, and that I'm stuck in like wanting people to behave in the way that I perceive as the right way to behave, and to be aware of the situations around them. And similar things later, like I'm driving, there's a big group in the middle of the road, there's a sidewalk, they're still in the middle of the road walking. Again, I drive very close to show them not okay, they don't even react. And in Nimman, random groups seem to enjoy just walking out into the middle of the road at times and cause these sort of like chain reactions.
It's on. It just cut out. Just some information.
Where it gets dangerous for everyone, because someone has to brake and then everyone else brakes, and usually people don't just venture into the middle of the road like that in Thailand. So I think my problem is that I want reality to be the way I perceive it as it should be, right? And I'm not accepting it as it is. But because I already have this irritation built up inside of me and I haven't been able to let it go, like I've identified that state, I know that it often occurs like after this particular circumstance. But I'm so vulnerable in that state to being taken over by anger. And I'm aware of it, and yet I can't seem to sort of snap out of it. Sometimes, yes, I can hold it back a bit, but it's much easier to work on it when I'm not in the situations, right? Like I could put myself in a situation where this same thing happens, and I'm fine, because I came from a better place. So what's your game plan for this? Like how to deal with it as it's actually bad already, I guess I'm more interested in, and also like maybe what to do when one is not in a good space and sort of needs to be alone in a room to be able to process.
Yeah, this is a good part to discuss. So let's first go through this and then we'll get to that one, okay? So if you're noticing that getting a massage, there tends to be this agitation that comes up in the mind. It's not that emotion is stored in the body. This is a really big misunderstanding in the world. People think that emotion is stored in the body. It's all in the mind, that there's some craving, desire, attachment that's getting triggered during the massage. That's what's producing the discontentedness in the mind. So in this situation, since you know it's occurring around the massage and when you're done with the massage, I would encourage you to do more and more and more of those. And it's really easy to do here in Thailand because it's only 250 baht an hour. But it sounds like the 2-hour ones are the ones that are really deep and really intense for you. So that's what I would encourage you to do, is do those. You can probably get upwards of 2 or 3 massages a week. And the body would still be fine with that. My wife sometimes does massages every single day on some of her clients, and it can be really intense. But that's what I would suggest that you do, is continue to get massages, because there's some craving that's being triggered there. And sometimes you don't even know what it is. I'll give you an example. My son, when he was 2 years old, we were walking down the street in America, and there was this dog that was pretty big. It was a German Shepherd, but it was still a puppy. It was probably like 9 months or 12 months old, and it saw this little boy coming, and it was like, that looks like someone to play with. And this dog like lurched at my son, and he started crying right away. He was 2 years old at the time, and I picked him up and I was holding him, and the dog went by, but the dog was just trying to lick him and play with him, but he was kind of rough, and the dog didn't know that's a 2-year-old child. You can't do that. But nonetheless, my son had this experience. So then when we got here to Thailand and he was 2.5 years old, then around 6 years old, I noticed that when dogs were coming around, that he was scared. He was very fearful of dogs. And I understood why, because it was that incident back in America that his mind was holding on to, and he didn't even remember that it had happened. But it had happened, and he was having this fear when he was around dogs. And I asked him, I said, do you remember what happened in America? And he was like, no, I don't. So I explained to him what happened. And then we started going around dogs a lot. He started going around dogs, and now he's not afraid of dogs anymore, because he put his mind in the situation that it didn't want to be in, which was being around dogs. But nonetheless, I tell you this story because whatever is happening during the massage, you might not even remember this particular thing happening. It could have been in your early childhood. It could have even been from a previous life that there was something happened. There's some craving, desire, attachment that's getting triggered during your massage. And I can't say what it is by just talking so far about what we're talking about. But whatever it is, it's getting triggered through the massage. So that's why I would encourage you for number 3 to keep doing that. And while you're in the massage, if you're noticing any agitation or frustration coming up, try to cut it off and cut it off and cut it off. And that's a good place to do it because you can close your eyes, you can focus on your breath, and you can be doing some breathing mindfulness meditation while you're getting the massage, because it doesn't require you to do anything other than to just sit there with your mind and focus on the breath so that you can cut it off and cut it off and cut it off and restrain the mind. So that's the first thing. The second thing with the motorbike, you're going to get that experience where you'll park your motorbike and people will block you. You shouldn't have any expectation that your motorbike's going to be freely able for you to come out and easily to leave. So wherever you park your motorbike, don't have any expectation that it's going to be in any particular condition when you come back to it. So that way, when you come back and it's like, oh, there's a motorbike there, you just kind of slightly move it to the side and then you can get your motorbike out. No big deal, right? But then the stuff about people walking in front of the traffic and the person on the phone and stuff like this is a similar situation to Chris, where you saw somebody doing something that you wouldn't do, and your mind labels it as this is idiotic, right? To walk across the street looking at a phone. I would say that that's unwise to walk across the street looking at your phone, because you're not practicing singleness of mind in that situation. And people have been killed for those kinds of things, right? Like people in New York City, they're talking on the phone, they're walking across the street, or they're looking at their phone and whack, they're dead now because they weren't practicing singleness of mind. So I would say that it's unwise to do that. But when you label it as idiotic, this is your own ego that's doing that. That's your own judgment, your conceit. And you would like to get rid of that. And you would like to shed that and realize, like, for you wouldn't choose to walk across the street and look at the phone because you know it's unwise, but this person doesn't. And if that person is choosing to do that, that's on them, and they're going to experience the consequences of that. And that's for them to sort out. But as soon as we judge them for doing something differently than what we would do, that's the mind's ego. So if this person walks across the street, and let's just say they get hit by a car, and let's just say they die. That's the consequences. That's their karma. That's the results of their decisions. You can't stop that. You can't fix that. You can't change that. Or all the tourists and Niman who are crossing the street in front of the light. You can't change that. You can't fix that. Just sit there on your motorbike and just know that this is something that you wouldn't do. But the fact that they're doing it, it's affecting them. It's not affecting you because it's their choice to walk across the street in those situations. So you're going to need to identify this ego that's trying to label something as idiotic or stupid or anything like that, and say, no, I'm not going to let you do that. Don't label people that way. It's something different than what you would do, and that's understandable. It's different than what you would do. But as soon as we label it as being idiotic, that's where the ego's coming in. So you can get rid of that by just not allowing the mind to do it, like cut it off and let it go, and don't allow the mind to judge it. But the main one that you were talking about with the massage, that's the one you can put your mind in that situation. The motorbike, that's going to happen. People are going to block you sometimes, so that's going to happen naturally. And then the same thing of driving down the street and people crossing in front of you, that's going to happen by itself as well. So you don't have to induce that. But the massage one, you can actually induce. Make sense?
Totally makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe this is common for everyone. What about the aspect of sort of policing here? I think that's a big part of the problem, like wanting things to be a certain way. Is the key to that to just cut off, let go, notice, and then the rest? And can loving kindness be applied as an antidote directly in the situation as well? Say at the traffic light, trying to switch it to, yeah.
Exactly. When you say the policing, do you mean like you wanting to police others and tell other people what to do? Or do you mean the actual police of Thailand telling other people what to do and fining them for not doing things properly.
No, me wanting to tell people how it is, how they should behave.
Yes, that's the conceit. That's the ego. And that's what you would like to get rid of, right? Because we all grew up in certain environments. Like, I think you're from Australia, it sounded like. Yeah. Where are you from, John? Sweden, that's right. Sweden, you grew up in Canada, you grew up in the US, you grew up in China maybe. Different people grew up different places. And our minds conform to what's going on in the place where we grew up. In maybe 90, 95, 98% of the time, people in that region of the world kind of do things in a certain way because we're all kind of taught to do things in a certain way. And we start conforming to what's going on around us. But now when we go to a different place like Thailand, and now you've got a mixture of all kinds of nationalities and all kinds of international people, and everybody's doing things differently. And now it's like, whoa, this feels so weird. And now it's different than what you've experienced. So it's the impermanence, right? The mind's experiencing impermanence, but it's craving this permanence. And now we start judging. If there's ego in the mind, you start judging, or you want to start policing people and telling people what they should and shouldn't be doing and stuff like that. But that's all based on your cravings and your expectations, based on how you grew up. And not everybody grew up that way. So you got to just be able to see this stuff as impermanence, that everybody's doing things differently because of impermanence. And yeah, when you're noticing you're agitated and frustrated because people aren't doing things your way, that's where the loving kindness comes in. And you see that person walking across the street looking at his cell phone. May you be well, sir. May you be well. Or that people at the 7-Eleven who are, taking a little bit of time to put away their money, may they be well. If they're well and they need that extra 3 seconds to put away their money and that makes them well, wonderful. I'm pleased that they took that extra 3 seconds. That's completely fine with me, right? So that's what your mind's got to get to, that not judging other people, not expecting them to do things the way that you do it. Don't judge them for doing things differently. And where you see you wanting to police and tell people what to do, you got to restrain your mind and pull that back, because that's the ego wanting to get in there and give this unsolicited guidance to other people. And the mind's trying to fix the outside world. And the mind thinks, if I can get everyone to do things my way, then the world will be peaceful. But the world's not functioning according to John's mind or David's mind or Claire's mind or anyone else's mind. It's a functioning according to the natural laws. And when you can see that, oh, this is just impermanence. That's all it is. It's just impermanence. And now you can just get rid of your craving for things to be done a certain way. And you can understand, like, oh yeah, everyone's just doing it their way. And I'm just going to make decisions that keeps this being safe. And as long as I make decisions that keeps this being safe, that's what matters. Because by keeping this being safe, I'm also keeping these being safe too, because I'm making the wise decisions. But if those beings do things in an unwise way, that's up to them. So I'll give you a little story that happened with me this morning. I was driving down the road on my motorbike, and there was a pigeon in the middle of the road, and I saw it up there. And normally the pigeons, they'll fly away when they see you coming. And I was just driving on my motorbike, and I was like, oh, there's a pigeon. Okay, it's probably going to get out of the road. It usually does. And I just kept on going because I saw it kind of walking this way. And I was like, if I keep on going to where it's at, which it was right in the middle of my way, I was like, by the time I get there, it'll be gone, right? So I kept going and going and going. And as I was getting closer, it wasn't really moving. And then eventually it kind of did a couple of hops. And when I got close to it, it hopped and it hit my fender on my motorbike. And it wasn't that hard. It was like a little pop. And then I looked back and it just kind of flapped its wings a little bit. And I was like, oh, that's unfortunate. Too bad. It should have gotten out of the way. And there was a truck right behind me, so I couldn't hit my brakes to stop. So out of loving kindness for this being, I just kept on going, and I tapped it. But I wasn't feeling guilty. I wasn't feeling shameful, because it was that being's decision to be in the middle of the road, right? And of course, it's an animal. It doesn't understand that this is a roadway. But that's one of the issues of being in the animal world, that your consciousness isn't as developed as a human being. But even sometimes human beings are out in the middle of the road looking at their phone. So if these beings are making unwise decisions that are leading to their harm, that's their decision, and you can't control that. All you can do is take care of the safety of this being and then you navigate the world in such a way that you're not causing harm to other beings. But in some situations, those other beings are going to be making decisions that harm comes to them as a result of their unwise decision. And you weren't looking to cause that harm, but that harm came to them. So this pigeon, I wasn't looking to cause harm to it, but it got hit, just a little tap, and then, kind of went on its way. So you got to be able to get comfortable with this impermanence, that with all these beings around, they're not going to function the way you might want them to function. So just get rid of all that wanting, get rid of all that conceit of labeling people in a certain way, and just decide that you're going to do things in the best way that you know how, and that other people aren't going to do it that way. And partially, that's actually what makes the world such an interesting place, is that we all do things differently, right? If every single one of us did things exactly the same, it would kind of be a boring world. That's the interesting thing about the unenlightened mind. It craves permanence, but if we actually got that, we probably wouldn't be interested in living in that world. Because think if like Thailand was exactly the same as Sweden. Why would you ever come to Thailand? Right? There was no need to come to Thailand. Or what if Thailand was exactly the same as Australia? Right? You would have no need to come to Thailand, right? But because there's so many differences and uniquenesses in the world, that's one of the things that makes the world such an interesting place. So even though this unenlightened mind, it craves permanence, if we truly got that, we probably wouldn't be interested in living in that world. So start looking at all the uniquenesses and the differences and the impermanence that you see in the world. Start to appreciate that and really value that as like, wow, this is quite interesting that people do things differently. This is quite fun. So that's another way to kind of change your perspective about how people do things differently in a different way. Okay. So does anybody else have anything they would like to share? Yeah. Do you like to do this?
Okay, my question is, if I have the knowledge that nothing is permanent, and I know my good feelings is based on my craving, my attachment, and all these things, how can I really enjoy the moment? Because there is something happened this morning. I met a new friend yesterday, and we were happy to see each other again. And today after the yoga, his friend invited me to join their coffee. When we got the coffee, we found another group of people from the yoga as well. So eventually it's become like 10 or 12 people's big group having the coffee. When I paid my bill, I found there were 2 seats. One is really close to him, but I need to cross another person's seat. Another is pretty far away from him and all his group of friends. So I immediately choose a very far away seat. I thought I didn't think, but actually when I recall all of the things, I think maybe I was overthinking during that moment. I thought engage with this kind of group and nothing is permanent, and maybe I'm craving something, so I need stay really far away. But actually this behavior is kind of strange, because I choose to be as far as I could to the person who we are really happy to meet each other again. Mm-hmm. So that's my question.
Yeah, so with craving, desire, attachment, you can only be happy if you're getting what you want. So in that example, if you went to the coffee shop with the craving or the expectation that you will sit next to your friend, then that means you can only be happy if you sit next to this friend. But now when there's 12 people and you can't sit next to your friend, you'll feel strange, you'll feel awkward, you'll feel uncomfortable. So what you would like to do is get rid of any craving and expectation and be like, hey, we're going to the coffee shop, without any expectation of where you may or may not sit or who you may sit next to. And then in that situation, you can be happy no matter where you sit, whether you're next to this person or that person or this person, or if there's no seat at all and you need to leave and go to the park, you can be happy no matter what. But if you have a craving that I want to sit next to this friend, then you can only be happy in that situation. So when you get rid of your cravings, desires, attachments, you'll actually be happy all the time, because no matter what's transpiring in these situations, you can just always be happy. If you sit next to your friend, great. If you don't sit next to them, great. If there's no seat at all and you need to stand, okay, that's fine too. If you need to leave and go to the park and sit down and drink your coffee in the park, you can be perfectly happy with that too. But with craving, you can't do that, because there's only one scenario that the mind's going to be able to find happiness in. So that's why getting rid of your cravings is so helpful to you, because then you can be happy no matter what. Make sense? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, it must be getting close to lunchtime. It is. All right. So let me just check online, see if we have anybody online that's asking any questions. Okay. I have people commenting, but no questions. Okay. So it's basically just a little bit before 12. When we come back from lunch, we're going to do loving kindness meditation the way that I just did, so you guys get a chance to practice that again. But then I'm going to teach you about cultivating healthy mental states of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. I'm going to explain to you the symptoms that you're going to see in your mind, and I'm going to explain to you the remedy and how to bring these 4 healthy mental states into the mind. This is where, like, the Buddha gets a reputation like a doctor, because there's like a symptom and then there's a prescription. But the Buddha doesn't have to be the only doctor. You can be your own best doctor, because with your mindfulness and your awareness of mind, you'll be able to see these symptoms, and then you'll be able to apply the prescription or the antidote. So I'm going to teach you this starting at 1:30, because now it's almost 12. So we'll get like an hour and a half plus a little bit more lunch. So enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you guys at 1:30. Okay? So enjoy yourself. Take care. All right.